Chapter 130 Strength of a Dozen Men. In the morning, they set out for the castle. Before leaving the safe haven of the granite tower, Effie gave them a list of instructions. Follow behind me. Listen to everything I say. Don't make any noise. Don't bleed. Don't think too much. Some of the creatures out there can hear noisy thoughts, others can sense strong emotions. So don't feel fear either. Sonny stared at her with a grim expression. How was he supposed to control what he feels? The vigorous huntress grinned. What? You never tried to solve math equations in your head to impress a lovely lady? Just do the same. As Sonny's cheeks began to turn bright red, she giggled and turned to Cassie and Neff. Correction. The two of you, try not to feel fear. Doofus, you try not to get too excited. If walking behind me turns out to be too much, ask to get slapped, alright? Sonny scowled and uttered through gritted teeth. That won't be a problem. Effie blinked a couple of times, then smiled. Playing for the other team? I see. What was that supposed to mean? Trying to get his emotions under control, Sonny took a deep breath and counted to 10. Math equations, my ass? Who does she think she is? Wait, why am I counting? Making sure that they understood her instructions, the huntress turned around and rolled the massive slab of granite that blocked the exit from the tower to the side. Lean muscles tensed and moved under her olive skin, making for a picturesque view. Sonny stared at her back and gulped. That slab of granite had to weigh a couple of tons, at least. How strong was the beautiful giantess, exactly? Catching a glimpse of his stare, Effie raised an eyebrow and winked. Like what you see? He answered on autopilot. Yes, wait, no. I mean, that's not why I was looking. How are you that strong? She glanced at the granite slab, then at him. Oh, that's my aspect ability. It's a strong all-around physical enhancement. That was a very rare and powerful ability to have. While not as flashy as many others, it was practically the ultimate warrior ability. With not only her strength but also her speed, agility, endurance, and resilience boosted, Effie was like one of those ancient heroes Neff sometimes talked about. Especially since that boost seemed to be so extravagant. Plus, she had most likely absorbed a very large amount of soul essence over the years of hunting monsters in the Dark City. All those shards the recalcitrant huntress refused to pay as tribute to the tyrannical lord of the castle had to go somewhere. But why would she just admit what her ability was? Sharing secrets like that was not a wise thing to do, especially not in the ruthless reality of the Forgotten Shore. Noticing his surprise, Effie grinned. What? It's not like it's a great mystery. Around here, anyone with a pair of eyes knows what my ability can do. Do you want me to tell you what my flaw is as well? There was a mischievous glint in her eyes. Yeah, right. As if anyone is insane enough to share their. It's very simple. My aspect not only enhances all my physical attributes, it also does the same with all my physical needs. Why do you think I ate enough meat to create a literal pile of gnawed bones, for the fun of it? She laughed and shook her head. Well, it was fun, not gonna lie. So the price for having the strength of many men was to have the hunger of many men, as well. Out here in the Dark City, where food was scarce and hard to come by, it was a dangerous flaw to possess. It was a curse that could force a person to hunt more, and therefore risk injury and death more than anyone else would have to. Most people would scoff at its severity, but not Sonny. He knew what hunger, real hunger, felt like. What it could do to a person. Perhaps that was the reason why Effie was out here in the first place. Perhaps she had become a huntress not because she wanted to, but because she simply didn't have a choice. What other physical needs do people have? Sonny thought, a little confused. Air, then water, and food, then, Hey! I said not to get excited! Sonny flinched and looked up at Effie, who was staring at him and cackling. Embarrassed, he gritted his teeth in anger. Don't flatter yourself, Beanpole. However, when he noticed that Nephias and Cassie were observing them with amusement clearly written on their faces, his anger somewhat subsided. Belatedly, Sunny realized that, perhaps, the experienced huntress had been joking around with him not just out of pure mischief. Perhaps she was trying to lighten the mood to get them into the right mental state, thus making traversing the cursed city less perilous. Meanwhile, Effie grinned. What? No answer? Sunny glared at her and said, Don't distract me. Then he forcefully changed the flow of his thoughts and reluctantly added, I'm solving equations. A minute later, they left the granite tower and stepped onto the streets of the dark city. Effie had summoned the helmet of her archaic armor before venturing forth. It was of the Corinthian design, with a tall crest of blue horsehair and a narrow visor that left only her eyes and lips exposed. On her back, there was a leather bag containing the meat, bones, and hides of the monsters she had slain during the hunt. Sunny knew for a fact that this bag was much larger on the inside than it seemed from the outside. Otherwise, in order to accommodate all of F's trophies, it would have had to be comically big. However, it still weighed way too much for an ordinary person to carry. Including the armor, the long knife, and the black leather apron, it was the fourth memory he had seen the huntress summon. He wondered how many more did she have in her arsenal. He had yet to see what weapons Effie used. In the ghostly light of early dawn, they entered the cursed ruins. Chapter 131 Traversing the Dark City. The mournful ruins of the once great city sprawled around them like a desolate stone maze. With gray skies above and nothing but dead silence surrounding the cohort of 4 tense sleepers, it seemed as though they were walking through a vast, cyclopean graveyard. Sunny had to constantly remind himself that there were countless horrors hiding in the ominous shadows of the dark city. One wrong turn could land them in dire peril. In this ancient ruin, they had no choice but to entrust their lives to the hands of their guide. Luckily, the guide in question was not a morose dead poet, but a tall, extremely attractive young woman clad in a pleasantly revealing archaic armor. In their current circumstances, Sunny much preferred the company of a warrior to that of a useless scribbler. In fact, circumstances had nothing to do with it. He was having trouble imagining any situation where a writer would be helpful to have around. From what he knew, all writers were lazy, talentless hacks whose only real skill was finagling money out of honest people while getting off on torturing them with sadistic cliffhangers. Not to mention that none of them had a backside like Effie. Wait, what? Getting his mind out of the gutter, Sunny frowned and reminded himself to keep his emotions in check. In a sense, this harsh necessity was a blessing. The perilous reality of the ruined city prevented them from concentrating on the bitter despair that had taken a stranglehold on their hearts after the grim revelation of the previous day. They just had to put one foot in front of the other and not think too much about anything. One step at a time. That was how he was going to survive. With a heavy sigh, Sunny glanced around and continued walking. Just like Effie had said, traversing the ruins turned out to be a slow ordeal. The huntress led them through the complex maze of wide and narrow streets, following a strange, convoluted path that only she knew. Often, they would have to stop and hide, waiting for some unseen danger to pass. Sometimes they walked under the empty sky. Sometimes they dove into the weathered buildings and spent some time crawling through the piles of rubble inside. Other times, Effie was able to lead them straight through half-collapsed houses to emerge into secluded alleyways on the other side. Once or twice, they had even climbed to the rooftops and proceeded forward by walking on precariously rickety tiles or bared support beams, jumping across vast chasms and balancing on half-rotten planks of wood that had been placed there by someone to bridge especially wide gaps. During these moments, either Neff or Sunny would carry Cassie in their arms. Sunny was surprised to discover that the interiors of some buildings were incredibly well preserved. It was as though the inhabitants had just left a few days ago, as opposed to the thousands of years that had passed in reality. Because of that, he was able to catch glimpses of how the citizens of this ancient city had lived all that time ago. It was a strange and eerie sight. He was also able to clearly understand that Effie indeed knew the ruins very well. Everywhere they went, there were signs of her previous visits and preparations. From the planks placed across the gaps between roofs to the heavy slabs of stone used to hide improvised passages, it was apparent that she had spent years of meticulous effort turning large parts of this lethal maze into her own private hunting grounds. He had gained a new respect for the seemingly carefree young woman. She almost made traveling through the cursed ruins look safe and easy. However, he knew that this couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, he suspected that death was constantly breathing down their necks, only barely held at bay by Effie's knowledge and timely judgment. Several freshly eviscerated carcasses that they had stumbled on served as a clear sign that Dark City was teeming with harrowing life. Even terrifying nightmare creatures were not safe here. More than once, they heard the distant sounds of claws scraping against stone, sensed the ground trembling under heavy footsteps, or noticed swift shadows falling through the clouds. In those moments, Effie would change their course on the fly or find a perfectly concealed hiding spot without fail. Meeting her had indeed been a rare stroke of luck. But with each hour that passed, Sunny grew increasingly somber. No matter what kind of future awaited them in this cursed place, he had no doubt that they would have to hunt for food as well. That meant that he was going to have to learn all the same things that Effie had learned, and maybe even more. The task seemed incredibly daunting. He wasn't even sure that he would be able to accomplish it. At least he wasn't going to do it by himself. There was Changing Star to partner with, and Cassie. Their presence calmed him down. Living in this terrible hell alone, he didn't even want to think about it. Such a wretched existence would surely kill him, and if not, at least drive him insane. At that point, he wouldn't wish to be alive anyway. Who would want to endure that kind of misery? Why think about something that is never going to happen? Glancing at Nephi and Cassie, Sunny hid a smile and hurried to catch up to Effie. Come to think about it, he had it way better than the recalcitrant huntress. There were reliable allies with whom he had forged bonds of trust and companionship at his side. The three of them made each other stronger. More than that, his own aspect was able to provide him with a similar comprehensive physical enhancement ability, albeit a lesser version of it. It was much more versatile, though, allowing him to transfer the enhancement effect onto memories and inanimate objects, not to mention his invaluable ability to move and scout around without being seen. Sunny would offer the services of his shadow to Effie, but he wasn't sure about how safe that would be. If there were creatures in these ruins capable of sensing thoughts and emotions, what were the chances that some of them would be able to sense the gaze of the shadow as well? He would have to learn more and experiment before allowing it to wander around on its own. These thoughts had cheered him up a little. Soon, as the sun began to fall toward the horizon, they had finally reached the base of the hill on which stood the magnificent castle. Sunny looked up, sensing his heart beating wildly. A heavy and anxious feeling took hold of his mind. Depending on what happened next, their fates were going to change forever, either for the better or for the worse. Chapter 132, End of the line. In the center of the cursed city, a tall hill towered above the ruins. At its base, an arch made of pristine white marble stood amidst the devastation. It was unscathed and spotless, as though protected from the entropic touch of the all-consuming darkness by some sublime force. Beyond the arch, a wide road paved with white stones scaled the hill. Sunny looked up as they passed beneath the arch, trying to imagine crowds of festively dressed people doing the same in the distant past. It was hard and a little heartbreaking thinking about how the ancient city must have looked before the mysterious calamity. Not turning her head, Effie said in a wistful tone, "There are areas in the ruins that many nightmare creatures tend to avoid for some reason. The castle is one of these places. I was told that back when the original group of sleepers came here hoping to carve a foothold in the city, there was only a single spire messenger nesting in the throne room, with no other monsters around. Those madmen actually managed to kill it." Nephi gave her a glance. "Spire messenger?" The huntress chuckled. Big ugly bastards with black feathers and pale bodies, you must have seen them hunting in the labyrinth. They come from the spire. Changing Star hesitated. What are their rank and class? Effie shivered a little. Fallen beasts. That's why I said that those guys were a little mad. But they were a powerful bunch. She grew silent and then added in a quiet voice. It must have taken a lot to kill them, in the end. Brought into a solemn mood by that last statement, they continued forward in silence. The stone road coiled around the hill, slowly climbing its sheer slopes. Here and there, it was broken by long stretches of stairs and formidable, but strangely graceful fortifications. No one was standing guard, though. The whole road was empty. Sunny gestured to one of the stone barricades and asked, "Why are there no watchmen?" Effie shrugged. Gunlog has barely enough people to man the castle walls. They will notice anything that approaches the hill, though. The whole city is in clear view from up there, and there are different protective measures put in place. They have already spotted us, too. Sunny shifted his body a little, not enjoying the feeling of being watched by some unseen, potentially dangerous strangers. After a long time walking up the coiling road of white stone, they finally reached the zenith of the hill and saw the mighty castle in all its glory. Up close, it looked even more magnificent. Built from the same pristine marble as the arch at the base of the hill, it stretched into the sky like a white mountain made by human hands. The frontmost tower was wide and imposing, with a tall decorated gate and a grandiose staircase leading down from it to a vast stone platform that the road ended with. On both sides of the frontmost tower, brought slightly forth, two others stood as bastions, connected to it with arched aerial bridges and accompanied by smaller companion towers of their own. Behind them, the main keep soared even higher, as though trying to challenge the menacing crimson spire that loomed above the world far in the distance. Smaller towers, spires, and wings stood here and there, forming a complex and strangely harmonious formation. The whole structure was incredibly beautiful, striking, and at the same time radiated a feeling of unassailable firmness. It was as though the castle was built for gods, not mortals. The only thing that spoiled the picture were dozens of human skulls hanging above the gates on rusty chains. Sunny grimaced, brought down to grim reality by this ghastly sight. His gaze fell lower, only now noticing dozens of crude, makeshift hovels huddled on the stone platform. They were built from fragments of rubble, rotting wood and pieces of monster hides, chaotically clinging to the stones as if afraid to be blown away by the wind. An unpleasant, strangely familiar smell hit him in the nose a few moments later. It was the motley, but unmistakable stench of the slums. That stench was nothing like the poisonous reek of the outskirts, and at the same time exactly the same. Sunny couldn't help but smile crookedly. Gee, I'm home. Between the hovels, gaunt and empty-eyed people were busy eking out their pitiful existences. They were dressed in a strange mix of dirty rags and shiny memories, with those wearing armor standing out among the rest like rare oddities. Most of them were extremely young, barely older than Sunny himself. He could smell their exhaustion and desperation even from where he was standing. Sunny really wanted to laugh. After everything he had been through ever since becoming infected by the nightmare spell, the cycle had finally completed. He was right back to where he had started, only much worse off. Wasn't that the funniest thing ever? If this wasn't fate, then he didn't know what was. Oh, the irony. Changing Star's voice tore him away from his reverie. Sunny? Are you okay? He blinked a couple of times, then slowly turned to face her and said after a brief pause, Yeah. I was just reminiscing. Something in his voice must have sounded strange, because she gave him a long look before turning away with a short nod. Good. Don't relax just yet. Then, she turned to Effie and asked, What do we do now? The huntress looked around and shrugged. It's going to get dark soon, so I would advise you to find a shelter before that. Look around for an empty hut. With how many people die each season, there's always plenty of those. Otherwise, 2 of you can pay the tribute and go into the castle. But the third one will have to stay. Changing Star lingered, then said, What about you? Effie grinned. What about me? That luxury 1-bedroom cottage over there is mine. Mind you, it was built from the best kind of crap you can find here, although it's still crap. Anyway, I am going home, preparing myself a hearty supper, and then going to sleep. I'm dead tired from these last couple of days. Sorry, I don't host guests. Nephi stared at her, obviously wanting to say more, but then simply nodded. I see. Thank you for everything you have done for us. I won't forget it. Effie smiled, patted her on the shoulder, and turned to Sunny and Cassie. Bye, doofus. Boo, doll. See you around. With that, she began whistling a cheerful melody and walked away. The 3 of them were suddenly left alone, lost and unsure about what to do. The inhabitants of the outer settlement didn't pay them a lot of attention, only occasionally throwing an indifferent glance at the 3 young strangers. Only Cassie's beauty attracted a couple of intense, darkly fascinated gazes. After a minute or so passed in disoriented silence, Changing Star hesitantly took out the 2 soul shards that they had collected from the remains of the rolling stone and looked at the glimmering crystals lying in her hand. They had to make a decision.